Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Token Warrant. I'm Mike Zajko, one of your hosts, and
I'm Regan Bozman.
We've got Regan Bozman here. We've also got Jake Greenstein and Scott. Is it Dykstra?
Yep.
Like Lenny Dykstra from Space and Time, and we're going to be talking about Space and Time, their fundraising round, and a lot of other awesome details. So maybe just to kick things off, and thank you both for joining us in the dog days of summer here. But maybe Jake, just to kick things off, it'd be great to have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about your journey here.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for having me here. Great to be on the show. My name is Jake Greenstein. I'm one of the partners at Hivemind Capital. Hivemind is a large Web3 asset management firm. We launched in late 2021. I joined the team right at launch. It's been really exciting to grow from 2 people to about 20 people now. At Hivemind, I focus on the venture landscape, specifically in the enterprise and infrastructure. Half of the world. We divide things between enterprise and consumer. Space and Time was a great fit in that. We'll talk a little bit more about our thesis there and why we're so excited to partner up with Scott and the team. But it's been a really fun couple of months working with them. I've been at Hivemind the last couple of years, focused on this landscape. Prior to that, I was at Algorand Inc., leading their strategy team, and prior to that, I was a software developer and a consultant. But all things that I referred to as my pre-crypto time, and joined the space in 2017, 2018, and haven't looked back since. So.
Well, Jake, thanks for joining us. I don't know if you were at Algorand. Were you there for the token sale?
I was. It was a between the Inc. and the foundation, there was an interesting time.
I don't know. I don't know if you know this, but Regan and I were both at CoinList prior to starting Lattice, and worked very closely with your team on that token sale. Definitely it was a pretty momentous event for that 2019 bear market. It was real. I think no one expected that sale to go quite raise $60 million the way they did.
Yeah, I basically took an internship with them, kind of first business hire in the door, and got to meet Steve. And he was like, "Hey, help me close this fundraise." And everyone always asks, like, when was the moment you knew crypto was a thing? And for me, it was, we were closing that fundraise, and we sent out docs, we sent out an ETH address, a Bitcoin address, and said, get your funds in. And all around the world, money was coming in. On the Inc. side, this is separate from the foundation fundraise. And I was like, this is what crypto is for, right? Look at the the speed, and it was 10 p.m. at night on the East Coast time, and I was like, this is the future of money, and haven't looked back since. Now the foundation did their version of the token sale, so depending on which one you're talking about.
Got it. Okay, so you were on the Inc. side. Yeah, we mostly worked with the foundation team.
The amount, like, there was a raise on each half, so.
Very cool. That was the origin of doing auctions on CoinList, which
yeah. So you're definitely referring to the foundation original token sale. That was a whole different thing, equally as exciting. Saw that far from the Inc. side.
Yes, $60 million plus in, I think, in a couple of hours. So pretty cool. Anyhow, enough crypto history there for a moment. Scott, welcome. Let's hear about you, and we'll dig in a little bit on the Space and Time.
Yeah, great to be here. Appreciate you having me on. Scott Dykstra, co-founder, CTO of Space and Time, building a kind of crypto native data warehouse, the first ZK proven data warehouse for the industry, and a ton of AI tools on top of that. My background's been a decade as an executive at a company called Teradata, Fortune 500, $2 billion database firm, builds big data warehouses for the Fortune 500, like American Airlines and Southwest and JP Morgan and Blizzard Games. And it's kind of a decade of centralizing the world's data into these analytic black boxes controlled by mega corporations that kind of do whatever they want with your data. And it's exciting to be working in a space where kind of self-custody and democratization and ownership of not only like transactions and money on chain, but also like data as well. We're really excited. It's been a fun journey of building Space and Time for about 3 years.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, I know data it's definitely a hot topic of conversation, particularly as it relates to AI, and I know we'll get into that a little bit more. But Yeah, I guess what was the catalyst? You're at this sounds like very successful Web2 company building data warehouses. You've got all these fancy clients. Then you're like, okay, I need to get into crypto. What happened there?
I was writing smart contracts because I was bored during COVID in 2020. Needed something to do, needed a hobby, right? And I was fascinated by DeFi, by kind of the early phases of DeFi summer starting to hit and price oracles. And I was looking at Chainlink, and my co-founder Nate, who at the time was also working at Teradata, was invited to kind of advise the executive leadership team at Chainlink. We were both looking at oracles and thinking, okay, they're providing data points to smart contracts, mainly for price feeds, as well as a few other off-chain data points. And we're thinking, why isn't there a database that can provide full chain history or full expressive access, not just to a single data point like a price feed, but like anything on chain? And we were thinking, what would a crypto native database look like, right? I've been building databases my whole career, even academically prior, and I'm thinking, well, there has to be some kind of mathematical proof. We couldn't just have, for example, 30 redundant databases all doing the same work and then coming to consensus. And this is the early days of ZK. And so kind of sat down with some of the smartest people I know and said, is this possible, guys? Can we put together like a ZK proof that proves SQL database operations back to smart contracts on chain the same way an Oracle network kind of proves cryptographically guaranteed data, price feeds back to a smart contract? And so kind of with that lens, we started Space and Time in summer 2021 after kind of a year of research.
Got it.
Out of curiosity, because this kind of like we started our career at CoinList, and like the Filecoin token sale was kind of like the catalyst for that company. Like, were you all inspired by like IPFS and some of the content address stuff, or was it kind of more that's like pure data storage, and if we want like relational databases and access, this just like doesn't get us what we need?
Yes and yes. So definitely inspired by Filecoin and IPFS as a kind of a primitive to power Filecoin. That was the first thing we looked at, right? We're like, okay, what's out there? What's on the market? Okay, IPFS. And then to your other point, it's not about computing over data, right? IPFS is about just storing small bits of data, like anything under a gig. It's pretty efficient on IPFS. Think NFT media, as you know. IPFS is perfect for this, the content addressing of something like a half gigabyte NFT picture. But it's not useful or efficient or reliable or really the right format for processing data, computing over data. Like someone asking a question, or a smart contract asking a question on chain, like, show me Scott's wallet history and find any transactions greater than $1 million. IPFS is just returning an image. It's not really the right structure for that. And so we kind of had to start from scratch, unfortunately. We were hoping to use IPFS in the early days.
Yeah, I'm sure back then retrieving data in like an efficient way there were also probably a lot of challenges with that. But no, I mean, clearly it's an exciting market if people have been trying to crack this for a long time.
Can you maybe talk a little bit more about, because you guys are wedged into maybe you call it like the middleware stack for crypto. So how you fit and collaborate or don't collaborate with some of the other middleware components that a Web3 app developer might rely on? Like there's some things you guys are clearly trying to replace and other things that you're going to be, extending their functionality.
Yeah, very good question. I think about like storage of data, processing like actual SQL queries against data, oracles and relayers, keepers in that same category, other middlewares, things like bridging and cross-chain solutions. And I think all of them will someday very soon rely heavily on a ZK proven database or a ZK coprocessor if you're comfortable with that nomenclature. We're seeing this growing acceptance in the crypto industry of like, hey, there's better ways to kind of prove and keep trustless all of our middleware infrastructure. Like in 2022, everyone was just centralized. People tried to start building decentralized solutions where they'd kind of pseudo decentralized with like 7 nodes, 13 nodes, etc. But I think the future is just using ZK for cross-chain bridging, using ZK to prove Oracle operations rather than having, for example, 30 nodes come to consensus. And so what we're trying to do is plug into the best parts of the stack that make the most sense, like working with a lot of other ZK VM providers like RiskZero to like provide data into their ZK provers, working with Chainlink to provide ZK proven data into Chainlink and deliver it on chain through Chainlink, working with like a lot of the RPC providers to like get really, really low latency data. But as a developer, I think on chain, you don't want to worry about any of that. Humbly, like as a developer, I don't want to have to choose between like this massive stack of tools. I just want one on-chain endpoint that acts as like an API for me to get everything I need. And I think we'll converge on that more and more as we go.
Got it. And I mean, you mentioned developers and sort of like what their expectations are, what they want. One of the things that we've run into is there's certain categories of projects that like, these are really cool. Getting founders or the development team CTO to switch over from some existing centralized database is either reliant on like them being tied into like the ethos or like their users demanding it. Where are you guys seeing that pull come from right now? Is it like more people are just aligned with the vision, a decentralized solution here for the database, or like their users are just requesting it or feel like more comfortable with what you guys could provide on the back end?
Yeah, another really good question. I think all of our revenue at the enterprise level were kind of connections from Microsoft, and on chain, all of the B2B and the startups and the crypto teams that were building on us are kind of more inbound. So at the enterprise level, more mutual connections, kind of warming the customer up for us, opening the door for us, like larger American corporations like US Bank and SS&C Intralinks and others that were introduced by Microsoft. But on chain, we're getting a lot of inbound. It's a lot of teams, mainly in the DeFi space, that want to build more sophisticated DeFi solutions and still remain trustless and are looking for a solution, saying like, "Hey, I want to build a more sophisticated data-driven lending protocol. What's out there?" Right? And they inevitably kind of look at the ZK space and see who's building and what's available, or invest. Great partners like Hivemind would introduce us to portfolio companies that are looking for a solution. I talked to a startup this morning that's building kind of like an on-chain loyalty program to like track on-chain quests, Z-League Galaxy style activity on-chain, and they're looking for a ZK prover that they can run standard SQL queries against to ask questions about what loyal users are doing on-chain. And they just found us. So I think it's kind of a dichotomy between us hunting in the enterprise and going out there with mutual connections versus like on-chain, just people looking for a solution to actually build more sophisticated smart contracts.
Got it. Yeah, well, Galaxy and Layer 3 are both portfolio companies of ours. So if there's something you're doing in that realm, definitely we should try to introduce you guys. And maybe before we get into better understanding Hivemind, kind of how they came into the picture, this Microsoft partnership, just looking through some of your materials before the call, it sounds like a pretty critical component of your strategy. Like how did that come together? How are you guys working with them? Like, do you guys consider them a partner or more of a client? Like what's the relationship there entail?
We've been really fortunate. It's been a very deep relationship from the beginning. They were looking to make some investments in the infrastructure space. They were, led to Space and Time as one of the kind of the leading teams in 2022 that was building something that could be used at the enterprise level and could leverage a lot of Azure cloud compute, but also is a very crypto native developer tool. They led a funding round for us in late 2022. Microsoft's M12 did. And ever since, they've been a great partner. They've been introducing us to a ton of enterprises that have become customers of ours and like driven a pretty hefty amount of revenue. I'm doing some co-engineering with Azure engineers. Like my team and Azure engineers together are building like a relayer for GPT-5 coming soon to bring GPT-5 on chain. And we're co-engineering that with Microsoft. And then also they've, given us a lot of free compute, a lot of Azure credits that like beyond the 50,000 that you get, from like joining Y Combinator, we're talking like, in the millions range. So
that's the most valuable currency these days.
I know, right?
But before we move on, I think just like maybe contextualizing the product a bit more, like maybe like comparing this to just like, okay, like I have a relational database, I have like Postgres, I like query data, like where exactly does like the ZK come in, and like what's like the main benefit of that? Like, is it like storing data, you need to encrypt data that's stored on chain? Like how exactly are people kind of like using this?
Yeah, I think everyone thinks about ZK as privacy and encryption, and it's from our perspective, you should think about ZK as just proving computations, proving that you process data correctly. So imagine a database filled with all of Ethereum's history in kind of a familiar Dune style data format. And you want to build a new lending protocol on chain that before Scott takes out a loan, you look up Scott's borrower wallet and you say, hey, has Scott paid off some loans before? If so, I'll give him a better borrow rate. That question, has Scott paid off some loans before on chain, can be written pretty easily in SQL and queried against the entire Ethereum history. Now, classically, we'd either prove that by having a bunch of nodes redundantly do the same thing and come to consensus, or we just run centralized, right? And there's plenty of teams that do. Even to this day, some of the largest protocols that we all use on a day in, day out basis, particularly like derivatives protocols, are using off-chain centralized databases. But the future we're walking into very quickly is, don't go centralized. Don't have 30 nodes redundantly doing all the same work. Instead, just have one GPU answering that question, building a mathematical proof of that it did the answer correctly, that it found the answer correctly and didn't lie about either the underlying data or the computation over the underlying data, and then basically just oracle it or relay it back on chain, verify it on chain next block. And you just save so much headache, right? It's just it's extra security for the users of these DeFi protocols.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess shifting to Hivemind, like, Jake, maybe just like would love some background on kind of like how you guys thought about this space generally, and then maybe like the path to meeting Scott and the team.
Yeah, our journey started, I think, actually about a year ago this month, August 23, when so Hivemind in general, we try to be, a research-led firm where we periodically say, hey, we're going to do a deep dive on this sector, this sector, this sector, and bubble that up to, hey, where in this space do we think we should invest, and then how should we invest? Should that be a venture bet? Should that be a token purchase, or something else? And so we were doing a deep dive in data analytics because I think that's one of the spaces in which people are building enterprise-focused companies that have real traction, real use cases, real revenue. And if you kind of dial back to where the market was at that cycle, it was a less retail-focused market, less hype cycle-focused market, and we were looking for at that use case where people were coming together and actually paying for something and turning that into a product that people were using. So we came across Space and Time, and we came across we're digging through companies like Alchemy, Space and Time, and I just loved the vision of that. My first job out of college years ago, everyone had to learn to write SQL, and it's SQL is a powerful thing, right? It lets you really tap into kind of a new universe of analytics and data and dive deep into problems that you can't solve in Excel or need to solve more quickly or more efficiently, and so I love the concept at a high level of taking that and taking all this data that exists on chain. That's why blockchain is so powerful. It all exists. It's there for you, but putting in a form that users can interact with. And I think crypto in general has this problem in which the data is all there, but too many products are like, here's our API, like go. And what they forget is like the vast majority of people don't want to interact with an API. They want something easier. And so the Space and Time team, they actually launched a video. Scott, I don't know if you remember this. It was a video about your kind of LLM like future focus and how to take SQL and make it easier to just interact with and talk to. And that was the video I think that kind of really got us started thinking, because not only was this a product that we really liked in terms of what it could do, it was also something that people could interact with. And that's only part of their stack and part of their value add, but it was eye catching because it was skating to where the puck was going in terms of how can this be usable while being massively technically complicated under the hood, but boiling that down to something not a couple of people on your team could use, but more people on your team could use. And so that just got us started on our journey, and from there we got to know the team and hear about the partnerships they form with folks like Microsoft, and eventually we'll kind of talk about when they started raising the round and what got us refocused on it this summer as opposed to the last summer. But that was kind of the origin story there.
What Jake's referring to was actually another co-engineering effort we did with Microsoft when they led a funding round late 2022. Everyone was waking up to LLMs at that time. It was around the time everyone started learning about GPTs. And we got access to GPT-4 on Azure, kind of early access in January of 2023. And Microsoft pushed us heavily in that direction. They're like, hey, you guys have an incredible opportunity here to build something that no one else is really going to have because you have early access to GPT-4. And so we spent about 6 months co-engineering with the Azure AI Lab, this very sophisticated production grade prompt to SQL system where you just ask natural language about the chain, like natural language questions about the chain. A SQL statement gets generated and executed for you kind of in a few seconds with kind of hands off. So you'd say, hey, show me smart contracts on ZK Sync that are facilitating the most transactions today by volume, and show me top tokens traded through those smart contracts. And that natural language question gets converted to SQL, executed, and then can be routed to our prover as well if you want to prove it back to smart contracts on chain. So that's kind of another example of some co-engineering we did with Azure, with the Azure AI Lab in summer 2023, kind of early 2023.
Yeah, and it was part of the tech stack, right? Like I don't think your production grade systems are going to be necessarily written like that, but it's a way to explore, iterate, move faster, and can they speak to a wider audience to get your name out there. And especially as kind of the crypto market shifted and the tides turned, um, you know, the team came back and said, "Hey, we are thinking of launching a token. We're working through. We have LLMs, we have ZK, we have this, and this." Where they're playing the hits, and part of crypto is building a user base and a fan base, and building engagement, and having tools and having a team that recognizes the value of that was super important to us.
During the probably around that same time, you might remember there were a lot of pre-seed and seed stage startups that went to market with that exact pitch. We used at Lattice, we used kind of a generic deck version of that, and had all of our analysts that were interviewing at that time run through that deck and kind of analyze it. So it was definitely a moment in time where I think a lot of folks, were trying to pin down that market. Is that something you guys are, selling into teams to use today, like for querying, for instance, like if they want to do marketing campaigns or things of that nature, or was it more like a trial run with Microsoft?
No, it's kind of like a hook for customers, right? It's not the reason a customer would buy Space and Time. It's something that's a huge value add. And when they're trying to understand what is Space and Time and how do I get value from it, it makes a very clear demo for customers to understand what's possible. And since it's facilitated about 1 million queries, like 1.1 million last week or something, that were written with AI. So I'm not talking about like a fun little tool that we just kind of goofed off with. We use it for selling. We use it at the forefront of go-to-market, but it's actually helping customers drive value and understand their business.
And I think, as the funding round came back around and you guys were demoing the tech for folks, ourselves included, it was part of the tech pitch and, a compelling visual. And, it wasn't just kind of the surface, right? It was a gateway to saying, hey, check out what we're doing under the hood to make all of this happen and how we're proving all of this. And then, you go from LLMs to the ZK proofs and, down and down and down the rabbit hole where, some of that stuff at the bottom is the real value out of Space and Time, right, Scott? But you can't start there in some of these conversations.
Right. I can't get on the phone with like a DeFi team and say, hey, let's get into the architecture of our ZK prover. They don't care. They're just like, dude, does it work or not? But the way to show them that it works is start to ask questions about their on-chain data. So like in a call it a sales meeting, we'll just like ask natural language questions about their protocol and the smart contracts they've deployed on chain, get some answers back, and then say, hey, let me show you how to now prove that answer in ZK if you need to.
One of the things I love about these guys is like every time you peel back that layer of the onion, they had great answers, right? Whether it was like, here's our white paper, here's the many patents we have on this level of the tech stack. Like as you drill further down, it wasn't vaporware of like, hey, we slapped on this like LLM on top of a query generator that then hits like a centralized index database and like that's it, that's your product, right? Mike, you said you saw a lot of versions of that pitch, or I think that's easy. That's easy to build, right? But the ZK part of this, where you're, Scott, you can talk more about how much custom work went into, your patent stack and your proof stack and everything else to make this actually get on chain and usable. it was important to us that like that vision doesn't just stop at accessing data, but it's actually about building the future of like the next generation of apps that are smarter, that are doing more complicated things than just referencing a price oracle, right? For us, we put this kind of product in the oracle space in the sense that you're bringing data on chain, right? But it's a new class of oracle. It's not just putting price data on chain, or it's not just querying balances or something that's like easily accessible. It's how do I write complex logic, and then that to us allows you to build apps that are more consumer focused, have a wider audience, can power the next generation of crypto apps. So that's what our hope for you guys is.
A big unlock or light bulb moment for everyone is when they actually realize that smart contracts have no access to any data on chain except for their current transaction and anyone's wallet balance. That's it. Like when you realize that a smart contract can't even access 4 blocks ago, or ask the most basic question like, show me the volume of Scott's transactions today. That's not an answer that's not a data point that a smart contract in the EVM has access to. And people don't realize that. So like, what are you talking about, Scott? Why do I need like ZK proven database for my smart contracts? I'll just write that. If I need to access any information from the chain, I'll just access it from my smart contract while I'm writing it, right? Shockingly, you can't. You can access like the information about the current transaction flowing through your smart contract, my wallet balance right now. That's it. And so, if you need to unlock a broader design space for developers, and if you want to do that, you have to give them data somehow, but that without breaking the trustless model of the blockchain. Like if I want to build, a more sophisticated Uniswap where instead of letting anyone LP into the pool, I can create a special pool where only people who have staked my token for 6 months can LP into the pool. How do you know who staked your token for 6 months? Your smart contract has no access to that information. And that's why we spent 3 years doing some crazy research and building something from the ground up to provide that data really quickly. Next block.
You talk about like this, like the ZK, like proving the data is kind of like an optional thing. Like in some cases, people want to like leverage the co-processor and others don't. Can you maybe talk a bit more about like the different contexts? I assume it's somewhat correlated to like how valuable is the decision I'm making with this data?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like I talked to a lot of gaming teams building on-chain games, and that's a big part of our clientele. Like I wouldn't say that's more than 10% of Space and Time's revenue, but hey, we do have a large number of customers like Shrapnel that are building on Space and Time. And I talk to other games, they're like, why do I need to ZK prove in-game activity to my smart contracts? And my honest answer is you don't. Like I'm not sure you do. We also have optimistic queries. You don't have to ZK prove everything. Where the case in which you would, to your point, Regan, is like high value transaction where there's an incentive for bad actors to try to attack. It's all about where's the incentive? Like what's the incentive for either the game developers or external parties or even on-chain bad actors to want to find a way in to get some reward that they did not earn. So like if you're giving out like $100,000 on-chain payment for an esports tournament, there might be a big enough incentive for a bad actor to try to want to claim that reward, even though they did not win the esports tournament. And in that case, a little extra security goes a long ways.
And I think it's a close corollary of like something that we see a lot as investors, which is we only want people to launch a token when there's good reason to launch a token, right? I think everyone wants pitches, they want to launch a token. Our first question is like, okay, why? Or what does your token do? And a lot of times we tell teams, hey, I don't think you need a token there. And I'm glad Scott has that like filter in his answer, right? Because if he said everyone under the sun should use our product for every use case, right? They're not identifying the high value customers, and probably not getting maximum value capture of that situation either, right? Because they don't recognize the difference in worth between those two circumstances.
I think we're seeing this a lot also in machine learning. Like there's this growing like AI ZK space where people kind of graduating from centralized ML to like OP ML to like enclave/TEE ML to like full ZK ML. And that's at the extreme, right? That's kind of an extreme example. But on chain, we kind of go through that same decision tree of like, okay, first of all, why am I providing data to my smart contract or my AI agents that are trading on chain? And two, if I'm going to provide anything, is there value there? Is there enough value that a bad actor would want to try to manipulate it, try to tamper with it, try to use that data feed to kind of break the smart contract and get some rewards back that they did not earn?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, like I think crypto has shown clearly over the last few years, like if there's like something that's exploitable, like someone is going to figure it out. Maybe tying this back to the fundraise. I mean, Jake, you mentioned you started talking to Scott. I guess it was like last summer. Like, I'd love to understand the path more. Like, how did that lead to the investment, and maybe even just like telling us about the round at a high level.
Yeah. So the funny piece is, so we looked at it originally, thought it was super interesting, and I think it was pretty early, and I think Scott can give me his perspective. It was kind of early in their journey to where we ended up investing. Right, they were still thinking about what type of fundraise, what the mechanics of that round would look like. Not only valuation, but structure. Structure is really important for us in crypto. Like, is it an equity raise? Is it a token raise? Is it both? What is the ratio of those two things? And so, at the time, we kind of parked it for a while. It was like, hey, this is an interesting team, interesting product, but I think early in our collective journeys. And then, I think fast forward, I want to say something like 6 to 9 months. And, we heard the team was raising, it had a lot more shape and structure to that. And, I think it had a lot better product market fit too, in terms of where the market was at that time, where people were starting to recognize the value of some of this a little better than I think it did 12 months ago. And so, we expressed the interest, doubled back with Scott, started introducing him to the full team, did our kind of full write up and deep dive. And, we were really interested, and we wanted to co-lead the round. And, the goal there was to get some other partners on board to help propagate the name and, give these guys the cash they needed to really, raise. And then our goal when we invest in firms is we want them to not have to raise for 2 years again, because we want them to focus on the important stuff, which is building. It's not coming back and fundraising in 6 months or 12 months. So, we had a number of conversations with Scott and the team, and who else we wanted kind of on that list of partners. And Scott will kind of talk to more of his perspective, and we ended up putting together a great group of investors that hopefully can help these guys get to the next level. But I don't want to take too much credit. It's all this team and what they've been able to accomplish, and hopefully now that the money's in the door, they can get back to building, and we're excited to be on for the ride.
It was definitely a hectic fundraise. Took us about 6 months. I lost a lot of hair, lost a lot of sleep, and I will say, Hivemind probably did this. Was one to three firms that did by far the most due diligence in a good way, and asked good questions and really dug in deep with a very wise team that actually genuinely wanted to understand not just what our tech looked like and our architecture and what we're building and how we're going to launch a token in the future, but more importantly, what's our go-to-market, what's our distribution, what partnerships can we drive through the Hivemind portfolio, and not a lot of firms went to that length. I'll never forget, I was in London for DAS last year, or this year, sorry, for the Digital Asset Summit 2024 in London. And there was a Hivemind office there. So I stopped in, said hi to the crew. They took me to lunch, some folks from Jake's team, and really good vibes all around, but also just a couple hours of just asking me every little detail about how we're going to roll out this ZK proof, how are we going to actually get users, how are we actually going to drive revenue, how do we actually distribute, and then kind of helping us also think through some of this is important. And I think you kind of get this meme in crypto that investors don't need to be value add, that they're just there to give you money. And if they do give you advice, it's horrible advice. And I don't think that's true at all for Hivemind. We've had a really, really, really good experience.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott.
He paid me to say all this.
Term sheet. We're gonna do the interview, and he's gonna talk us up. So.
Yeah, maybe to build on that, it would be cool to hear a little bit more about how you guys have collaborated and in what capacity. Jake having, I think, you're on the strategy background. Is it more on the go-to-market side, a bit more on the technical build-out side? What area? I think every fund has to kind of pick and choose where they can try to add value. For you guys, where have you guys most collaborated?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say is it's early, right? It's early in their journey and our journey together. We haven't, we're filming this. We haven't even announced the raise, which is certainly kind of limited, what we can
Good
do on
point. Good
the
point.
public side. So, right away, it's, hey, how do we help these guys fill out the round? Introduce them to a couple of firms. Obviously, we can't make anyone's decisions, but we can connect them with investors we think they're good pairs with, and put them in the best position to help make some partnerships. And so we did that right away. I think some of those folks ended up being large players in the round, which is always nice to see. That's kind of one angle. The other angle that was particularly excited, and Scott and I have a number of conversations already and to be had, is Hivemind. We actually run node infrastructure. I think that's one thing that sets us apart from kind of the average VC that writes checks and talks about tokenomics and talks about marketing, because a number of folks do that, and I think we do that well. But we can also run nodes, and we've talked to Scott about how we can be part of their fleet and actually run verifiers and provers, and help them actually launch the network. So that's kind of where we're headed on one dimension. And then the other piece is, everyone talks about trying to give guidance on go-to-market and consumer and tokenomics, and I'd say I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, we're designing all of this, because I think that's disingenuous when firms say they're doing all of that. The team has to do all of that. But I think by asking a lot of the right questions and pushing on a lot of the levers, Scott mentioned it forces these guys to think about their narrative and how they launch the PR campaign, how we're going to announce the round, how we're going to get on this podcast or do the next podcast. And Scott can keep me honest, but hopefully we've been helping get the name out and push them to what's hopefully going to be a great launch. And then from there, we'll try to build on that.
Absolutely. And last thing I'll say is something that we saw very different about Hivemind, unlike just about any other firm in crypto that I know. And we've talked to every single one, and we got investment from a third of them or whatever, if you do the numbers. Is they were like doing some really cool deals with like Napster, LimeWire, and they were also doing some crazy NFT stuff with Sotheby's. And so when I kind of understood that, I was like, okay, these guys are thinking differently. They're not just yet another firm throwing money at us. They're actually kind of making moves of their own in very interesting ways. And I wanted to be part of that team.
So the Napster and Lime, are you speaking specifically to they were doing some stuff on the crypto side more recently? I don't know if that's what you guys were involved in, or if you're talking about the kind of the web 2 entities.
Yeah, it's actually one and the same. So, one of Hivemind's first deals when we launched was help take Napster private. And, our kind of thesis at the time, and still a big part of that today, is like, hey, we have this, true OG Web 2 music brand in a space that, I think is ripe for disruption. If you think about kind of the creator economies and what the promise of blockchain holds for empowering your users, empowering your creators, and kind of taking out the middleman. And so we're involved in that acquisition. I think they've been up to a lot of interesting things as they put a Web3 spin on their product, whether it's AI generated playlists or that's kind of the tech forward version of this, and the Web3 version is this is like token gated communities or NFTs for certain releases or certain song types. And that consumer thesis, I think, has played out kind of similarly on LimeWire on a smaller scale, but again, investment in which we were looking at a iconic Web 2 brand, but was trying to pivot and make a name for itself in the Web 3. And we've been that one was where we were probably more involved in strategy conversations and helping them put on their Web 3 hat and talk to people who are native to this stuff and say, here's why this token model won't work, or here's where you think this NFT launch might help engender kind of some community building. So I spend less time on that personally. I'm on the enterprise and infra space versus the consumer side, but we have a lot of interesting stuff going on over there too that gets the Hivemind name out.
It's cool. I mean, I feel like you think about like the way some of these like deep networks work today and how people are kind of contributing, like something like Grass and like BitTorrent or Napster, like it's not that far off, right? Like you were kind of providing useful service to the network. You don't really get compensated monetarily, but like you kind of got, priority access to use it. It's a pretty interesting analogy.
I feel like tech as a whole like skipped this wave in which, if you think back to when those companies launched, like peer-to-peer was the name of the game. And I would have thought back then that pirating would take off. And if you think about it today, like next to nothing is pirated, I think, in the United States. For that's good. I think pirating is bad. I want creators and platforms to be rewarded. But it is interesting that things went from that vision in the future to these centralized companies that like Spotify that make music available to everyone for low cost, and now shifting back into the hands of the end users in the network as opposed to some of these centralized intermediaries.
There's certainly a lot of viruses that were shared on those platforms back in the day. Clogged up many a dorm room computer was destroyed by those platforms. Maybe just kind of in the last few minutes here, Scott and Jake, you've alluded to a little bit of like what comes next for Space and Time. Yeah, getting into what we can expect. If you could talk or share any more about the tokens and plans around that front, if you can't, that's totally fine too. But yeah, what's coming next? And I know you guys are doing like an even more aggressive push on the AI front.
Yeah, it's exciting. We're building towards a mainnet, targeting Q4, but the world's changing fast, and who knows what mainnet actually will look like. I mean, in terms of date, targeting a Q4 mainnet and all the tokenomics that come with that, and we're really excited. It's a lot of work in the kind of the final hour here, right? We're going on 4 months, prepping with the exchanges and starting to build out the network and sort of onboard more node operators and begin testnet. But kind of on the even more exciting front than that, even, I mean, this is what as exciting as that is, we've been building towards it for 3 years, but there's actually something even more exciting that we've been cooking up, also kind of prompted or nudged by Microsoft. As we started to do AI prompt to SQL, we naturally kind of progressed from prompt to dashboard. Like, hey, instead of just writing a SQL statement, build a whole dashboard, kind of a Dune style dashboard. Just generate the whole thing from a single question. Like, hey, show me Lido staking flows. Give me a dashboard for Lido staking, right? And show like validator rewards and things like that. And then kind of time goes on and the interns get together on weekends, and we started to realize, wait, we can go from like prompt to full crypto app. We can just generate dApps. Like, is a sufficiently like interactive dashboard really is just like a dApp on chain. And so now we started building kind of a whole studio for building data-driven experiences, data-driven dApps, generating data-driven contracts that call Space and Time. And that's launching in Q4 as well, along with Mainnet. So we're giving something back to the consumers, kind of non-technical users that can use a chatbot and say, hey, I want to build this kind of fun little mini dApp on ZK Sync or on Ethereum or on Space and Time's own chain, get it generated for them, embed all the data, and then kind of launch it to their community. And I think that's going to call it like pump.fun for dApps. And I think that's going to be something that like consumers can touch and feel in a way that we don't really see that often in crypto. Grass built something that I could touch and feel, like a fun little browser plugin. Pump.fun did, Farcaster did, and now Space and Time will have something.
Yeah, we're just excited to be along for the ride as these guys gear up for launch and help support that. And I think the other thing is Space and Time is building a community of apps that are leveraging it. And Scott and his team actually have introduced Hivemind to other firms that are looking to raise and kind of be in the Space and Time ecosystem. And we're sitting on lots of cash for trying to deploy into venture investments, and introductions are always helpful. And this is a space we want to play in, so it's great to meet people who are building on this and hopefully help them level up as well.
Very cool. Well, thank you both for joining us. Maybe if people want to follow you, either Space and Time, Hivemind, you guys directly, where should they go to do that?
On X, formerly Twitter, it's at Chief Buildle, BUIDL, Chief Buildle. That's to follow me. And then Space and Time is at Space and Time DB. A lot of exciting announcements around the ZK space and everything we've already launched and are continuing to kind of push in the ZK community. And of course, more announcements coming around the AI side of things.
Yeah, I'm glad you reminded me that I can't keep saying Twitter. I'm on X at _Jake Greenstein, and Hivemind is Hivemind.capital is our website. You can get to our socials from there. So,
thank you.
You guys, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, we'll share those in the show notes, and excited to see the news come out about the fundraising round, share it with everyone. But yeah, thank you again, and thanks to everyone for listening.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks
All right,
guys.
Bye.
Bye.